Hello, this is Brian Hudson, and this video is an appraisal of the financial reality for paying parents who are under the child maintenance service and have cases that are alive where they're required to pay child maintenance that the CMS have calculated. So this started out as just a spreadsheet for my own use after child maintenance service have fabricated some arrears, quite large arrears, after a very sinister divorce. I won't go into the details of that, but essentially they've given me a bill of £18,000, which they tell me that they will enforce at the point that I start working again. At the moment, I'm on universal credit, having been had my company that I was running for 20 years destroyed, then a period of homelessness and being made bankrupt. So I'm no longer bankrupt as of about a month ago. But, of course, we've had the pandemic the last year. So jobs are in short supply. Businesses are going bust at an alarming rate, and the unemployment queue is growing. So I don't suppose it would be particularly easy to find employment, and certainly not at the rate that it seems I need to in order to find a way to pay off this fabricated debt, as well as then ongoing maintenance. I'll certainly have to be having a very high paying job in order to do that in any reasonable amount of time. So I wanted to see what the financial reality of that was. And in doing that, it dawned on me that this could be quite a useful exercise for lots of people in different scenarios. So my case is that I have one child under CMS, and I do have another child, but they're at university now. So this one child that's in the case, and I have him 3 days a week. So my actual monthly requirement to pay is a lot lower than most who are under CMS, and is still pretty difficult to manage in these circumstances. And I'm going to demonstrate why that is, what the financial reality is in today's world, and the cost of living. But I've also done a tab here. If you look at the bottom, you can see there's a tab where I varied it based on the scenario. If whoever's using this spreadsheet has one child for 3 nights in my case, 2 nights in this tab's case, or just 1 night, or even no nights. They have 2 children here for 3 nights, 2 nights, 1 night, or no nights, or even 3 children for, again, 3 nights, 2 nights, 1 night, and no nights. And then I'll also take you through a scenario where, for those that don't have any arrears, whether those arrears have been fabricated, inflated, or they're genuine. For the purpose of managing your finances, it doesn't really make an awful lot of difference. You've still got to find a way, really, to see what that looks like in the real world of the money that you earn and the money that you have to spend just to keep a roof over your head, and feeding your kids and looking after them if you have a share of their care. So let's go back to my case to explain the mechanics of it. So first of all, the top left-hand corner here in the orange cell, you can see a figure of 1.2. Now, that's there because if you are in arrears with CMS, they will put you on collect and pay rather than direct pay, and that means that they will add 20% to what you have to pay, that they will keep. Because, as everybody knows, when you are struggling with money, what you need is somebody to charge you more, because that always makes things a lot easier for you. Anyway, if it's not your case, on any one of these sheets, you can just change that to a 1, and it will adjust all the figures for you automatically. So that should just help you to organise yourself based on what your reality is right now, or perhaps the threat of them putting you on collect and pay, what that would look like financially in terms of what you've got to earn to stay afloat financially. So just if you look over to the left-hand side here, we have a scale that I've done of annual salaries that somebody might be earning, from £1,000 a year all the way through to £150,000 a year if you're fortunate enough to be on that kind of salary. No doubt you're working very hard for it. Then just to the right of that, I've put in a column that shows how much national insurance you'll pay on each of these respective salaries. So obviously at the low end, it's very low. And I've also put in here the amount of income tax you'll pay. Of course, to begin with, you're not paying any. And then on that amount of earnings, what child maintenance you'll be required to pay if your case is the same as mine, i.e. one child, 3 days a week, that they're with you overnight. So that hopefully is fairly straightforward. And of course, you can see immediately that this becomes a problem because these are my basic outgoings. I live just to the northern side of London. I in my rather sinister divorce, it wiped out all of the property that I previously owned. So I'm renting. Property down here is pretty expensive. So I'm in a relatively modest place, or actually a very modest place that's just sufficient for me and my son. But the rent is very high. And these are my usual other outgoings. Now, you can change any of these and it will update the spreadsheet. So this figure here is driven by all of these, okay? And these calculations up here in terms of what your balance will be are driven by what's in this cell here. So it's deducting that amount from what your take-home pay is just here, okay? So hopefully that's fairly clear as to how to use this sheet and interpret the output. What becomes really very immediately apparent is that in my particular case, if I were able to get CMS to agree that I pay off this fabricated debt at £100 a month on top of the other child maintenance, I would need to have a job. If I come all the way over here, you can see that I've created a table that's based on paying that off at £100 a month. It takes all the way until £50,000 a year of salary, which is this yellow line here, which is my minimum requirement in order to be able to pay off that debt, which would take me 15 years. So this table just here calculates how long it will take me to pay off that fabricated debt if I'm paying £1,000 a month down to £100 a month. And you can see that scenario mapping out for each of those stages in that table. Okay, so I would prefer not to be enslaved to that fabricated debt for 15 years. You know, in an ideal world, I would just get it off my back as soon as possible. So, you know, if I wanted to do that, how much would I need to earn? Well, the answer to that is I would need to earn a salary of £80,000 a year in order for me to be able to meet these living costs. And bear in mind that what you'll see here is I've made no allowance for pension, no allowance for entertainment, no allowance for holidays, no allowance for, you know, out of school activities for my son, no allowance for, you know, Christmas and birthdays or any other special events, no allowance for a rainy day, you know, if the car breaks down or any of that stuff. There's absolutely no slack been built into those expenses, but I would be required to have a salary of £80,000 a year. So what does that mean in the real world? Well, the average full-time salary in the UK is 35 grand. So I need to earn more than double the average full-time salary, nearly as much as, you know, the salary of a member of parliament is what I would need to be earning. And what does that mean if I'm earning these bands of salaries in terms of extra taxation that the government benefit from? Well, at 50,000, they benefit from another over 10.5 grand, all the way up to if I manage to get a salary of 100 grand, they benefit from another £41,500 of annual revenue. So that breaks down in this table here. So I'm showing you how much the increase is to the monthly maintenance at each step. So every time you advance yourself, the parent that's preventing you from seeing your children, the parent that is alienating your children from you, very likely, the parent that has, very oftentimes been domestically abusing you and is using the child maintenance service to financially abuse you. And they're all too willing to do that because, as I'll demonstrate in this video, there's a substantial government uplift in tax revenue by doing that. So the motive will become very clear. So anyway, you can see that there's an increase in your income tax here, an increase in your national insurance here. And of course, something that most people won't be aware of is that your employer is charged 13.8% of your gross salary as employer's national insurance contribution. So whenever you better yourself and get increase your salary, then your employer is contributing more to the government. And of course, the government love this. It really helps to fill the coffers, and it's really something of a stealth tax that nobody ever thinks about. So this table starts to put numbers on that. What is that benefit? Now, if I come over here, I wanted to look at, when you're having to earn a salary at that level, how many jobs are available at that level. So at £50,000, which just about keeps my head above water, if my outgoings don't increase, which they're bound to over 15 years. But let's assume that they're not. On a 50k salary, I have to find jobs that are only available in 20% of all jobs. So that rules out obviously 80% of all jobs I can't apply for, because there's not a lot of point, because I'll just be staying in debt. To me, that seems to be something of a restriction on my trade. If I have to find a job that is paying £80,000, not only do I have to really give a pound of flesh, because they're going to want an awful lot of commitment, and to give me a high degree of responsibility. Some key decision making will be on my shoulders, and therefore I really need to be top of my game. So under this kind of pressure to earn, where I'm just giving that money away, I don't feel particularly motivated to do that. I don't imagine anybody else does. But the reality is as well that only 4% of jobs in any case pay that kind of money. So the restriction on your trade is at 96%. And to me, it seems that is it has to be breaching employment laws. That you essentially you are driven into a position where you have to find work that you may well not have the skills for anyway. You may not be attracted to that kind of job, but you're forced into it. So is that some form of forced labour? In my mind, it seems to be so. And as a double whammy on that, in terms of the receiving parent, they will pay no tax on the money that you are providing for them, because you've been taxed on it. You've been taxed probably on a higher rate, because in most cases the receiving parent will either not be earning, or they will be in a part-time job. If they're working less than 16 hours a week, they will also be eligible for tax credits on top. So they will likely be receiving your maintenance tax-free. They may be able to earn up to completely their tax-free allowance per year of £12,500. They may be getting a tax credit on top, and they will be receiving all of the child benefit. So not only are they tax exempt effectively in many cases, a high proportion of cases, they are receiving additional credits to tax on top of that. And yet, as a paying parent, 96% of us being fathers, here we are being labelled deadbeat dads, and that seems rather harsh, to say the least. So in my mind, it's really very clear to see that child maintenance service are the driving force for parental alienation, and it's really little wonder that they do everything possible given these financials to keep the status quo. So anyway, let's move off this sheet. So you can come onto any one of these and you can adjust these figures accordingly to suit your circumstances, and it will give you a guide as to what this means in the real world for you. But let's go on to the scenario where you don't have arrears, whether they are fabricated, inflated, or they're genuine and legitimate. Let's look at where there's no arrears and it's just business as usual. So again, up here, you can adjust this if you are on collect and pay. Just put 1.2 in there, and that will adjust everything. I imagine the majority of people watching this won't be in that case. They'll perhaps have the threat of it, but they'll be paying directly. Just adjust that as you see fit. Now, even still, without the arrears, you can see that you really need to be getting to a £50,000 a year salary in order to be having any spare cash at the end of at the end of the month. So in that scenario, there's 170 if your expenses are the same as mine, okay? But you can obviously adjust that to fit your needs. But what I've done, instead of doing lots of more tabs here, I've put the number of children and the number of nights at the top here. So what you can see is that's my scenario: 1 child, 3 nights. But here we've got 1 child for 2 nights, 1 night, no nights, 2 children for a couple of nights, 1 night, no nights, and so on for 3 children. Okay, so there's the relevant table that suits how that's working in your particular case. But let's have a look at what the windfall is for government, and that this will help to get us right down to the nitty gritty of what's the motive behind all of this, because it seems such a dysfunctional system, not just child maintenance but family courts and what have you. Let's get down to the financial motive that's behind all of this. So this top set of tables I've left the same, and I've created this extra layer here which breaks down what the government windfall of tax is, on the basis that a paying parent is required to work much, much harder in order to stay afloat. So in a scenario where, again, you've got 1 child for 3 nights, 2 nights, 1 night, and so on, you can find the specific scenario that fits closest to your individual case just by scrolling across to the right there. And what we can see here is the additional taxation based on in terms of a percent of your overall salary that you are paying to the government over and above the child maintenance as a result of you having to earn more money. So this is really what you're worth to the government in additional tax as a result of being a child maintenance case with the relevant number of children and for the relevant number of nights. And you can see very clearly what the pattern is. You're worth more in tax to the government the more children you have and the least nights that you have. Okay, so with just 1 child here, I'm worth nearly 12% more in tax if I'm earning 40 grand a year. If I've got 2 children for no nights, I'm worth nearly 16% more in tax than I would otherwise be. And if I've got 3 children for no nights, I'm worth nearly 20% more in tax than I otherwise would be. So hopefully you're getting to understand the financial motive, the true financial motive behind CMS operating in the completely corrupted manner that it does. Okay, so you can absorb that at your leisure. That's dependent upon your own circumstances, and again, you can adjust this table to fit as well. Now, what I also worked out by taking data from the Child Maintenance Service own quarterly reports, which you can simply Google to find them. They are called Child Maintenance Service National Tables, and every quarter they produce statistical reports, and in there you're able to determine how many parents have overnight contact and how many nights of overnight contact they have. And this is essentially the results. So more than 3/4 of all paying parents have no overnight contact at all with their children. I was staggered by that. I didn't think it was that bad. But, we've got 14.25% who have just one night a week, 6.6% have 2 nights a week, less than 2% have 3 nights a week, and just over 0.5% with equal time with the parent who they are paying to. So I don't think there's a clearer illustration anywhere that this organisation is the driving force. It's the incentive and the reward for parents to alienate children from the other parent after separation. It could not be any clearer. I really don't think it could be any more clearer. Set out in statistics taken from the very organisation that administers this system. So let's get down into the nitty gritty around, what does that look like beyond our individual circumstance? So we know that we're being individually shafted, and having to work all the more hard, supposedly to support, our children, but in actual fact we are shoving extra money into the treasury, and the government are, for our trouble, referring to us as deadbeat dads. So the average salary we went through earlier is around 35 grand a year, but if I use these figures, which I have done over here, using these figures to calculate the average parent and therefore the average requirement to pay child maintenance, it comes out at £477 and 2p per month. So what I did is use a salary calculator to work out how much below £40,000, because this looks like the average requirement to keep, when you don't have arrears, the average requirement just to be able to meet your basic needs, it looks like being about 40 grand. So I deducted that from a 40 grand salary and took account for taxation. And without that £47 a month of child maintenance being taxed on my salary, I would only need to earn £31,500. So I wanted to look at what the taxation benefit to government was in the delta. So, between in that £8,500 in between. So the total income tax for a £40,000 salary, as you can see here, is 5.5 grand. The total national insurance that you're paying is over 3.5 grand, and the total national insurance, employer's national insurance, that most of you wouldn't have even given a thought to, that your employer is paying to government as a result of that 40 grand salary, is £5,520 a year. Okay, so the total tax that they're generating from your employment as a result of being on a £40,000 salary is this figure here. Okay, now compare that to if you are on a £31,500 salary, which is all you would need to be in order to meet the same outgoings where you're not needing to pay child maintenance in this manner. That comes to 10,800, and the difference is almost £4,000. Okay, and then of course what we do is we look at the total number of paying parents that there are now. So I calculated this based on looking at September's figures and then doing an average of the increase in number of paying parents over the last 5 years, and I've added those together. up to date. So that covers up until the end of March 2021. So the current figure of paying parents is approximately 538,863, and I've multiplied that by this 3,800, and that gives me a total figure here of over 2 billion. Yeah, that's right, over 2 billion in government stealth taxation receipts just from child maintenance service cases. Okay, so that will start to give you an idea of the financial motive behind this corruption. So I've then taken that figure and I've put it into this table here, and because this isn't all that they're generating, of course. This is the tax that they generate from us, or would generate from us, if there was not a child maintenance service, or we weren't paying in this manner. Okay, this is what they are generating as a result in tax receipts. Okay, and of course you've seen what the difference is already. But what is that as a percentage? Well, that's an uplift, increase in taxation of 35% on paying parents as an average, who are in child maintenance cases. So for me, that strikes me as tax fraud, but in reverse. I don't know about anybody watching this, but for me, that's tax fraud, because I'm not being told about that up front. I'm not, why is this not transparent? If it's not transparent, it's not like the government don't know how to work numbers. It's not like they don't have an army of accountants working in HMRC. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people who work specifically for government in taxation, and in collecting revenues. They know it would be beyond any reasonable person's assumption to think that they don't know what the tax benefit of operating a system this way is. And that has to be the motive for turning a blind eye to suicide en masse and to mental health problems en masse that are generated by this organisation. So let's go to this final tab. And I wanted to then, after doing that work, I wanted to understand what the retained income benefit would be for the paying parent, for all their hard work to pay the government all of this extra money, and to pay the receiving parent all of that money that they're, in a very large proportion of cases, doing very little for, and in many cases doing an awful lot, causing an awful lot of harm, by preventing the paying parent from having contact with the children. So let's see what that looks like. So if you're on 10,000 salary here, just a sec. If you're on a 10,000 salary in this column here, this is what you're paying in employer's national insurance. Okay, so even though you're not actually paying tax at this level, your employer is still paying tax. Okay, so make no mistake that you are making a contribution in terms of tax to government. But your effective tax rate is minus 250%. Okay, sorry, no, it's plus 250%. So there is no way that you could survive financially on a £10,000 salary. Certainly on the outgoings that you would need. And I've actually adjusted this table here for outgoings to be the UK average rent and the UK average council tax. So it does bring the outgoings, the minimum sort of outgoings, to just keep a roof over your head and be in a functioning state so that you can actually work, or or do whatever it is that you need to do. So let's take this down the bands, and it takes clearly here until 40 grand to be having effectively an annual salary of money that you will retain of £3,000 a year. So that's £1.54 an hour for your trouble that you personally, as the person doing the work, will benefit from. Everyone else is benefiting from the rest. And it takes until £70,000 for you to get a bit above minimum hourly wage. And if you Google minimum wage, I think it's now £8.61 an hour, and even at 60 grand, you're below that, which is quite staggering, really. But this is based on one child for 3 nights a week. That looks a lot worse when you come across here and you get to the average paying parent, which is actually 2 children for no nights a week. So you're only retaining an annual salary of £93.92 on if your actual salary is 40 grand, you're being paid 5p per hour. Okay, and you need to get to an 80 grand a year salary in order to breach the national minimum wage. So it really is pretty sobering. But for these poor bastards who are over here, they've got 3 children, they've got no contact. I can't imagine what it's like if you've got more children than that and you've got no contact. You have to be on 90 odd grand in order to just be breaching the national minimum wage here. So pretty sobering stuff, really. And it really raises the question as to whether this amounts to slave labour. Is this a breach of the Modern Slavery Act? In my mind, it's not just a breach of the employment law and restraint of trade. It's not just, tax fraud in reverse. Arguably, it's slave labour. And, we need to start thinking about it in those terms. Why should we be getting pushed into this scenario where, if we're earning 30 grand a year, we know that our debt pile will continue to grow at £1.21 an hour. If you're a youngster, I haven't even brought into this the fact that the younger people aren't going to be earning as much, generally speaking, as older parents. If you're in your 20s and perhaps you live in the north, the reality of you being able to generate a £30,000, £40,000 plus salary is all the more difficult because they're not available in the same quantity up there as they are down south and around London, for example. So hopefully this is of some use to you. There's a link to this spreadsheet that you can download it from Google Docs and then amend it as you see fit in the description for the video. If you want to see updates on my work, I will be finishing a revised report on CMS driven paying parent suicide this weekend, and then that goes off for peer review and publication into the Journal for Psychology and Psychotherapy. So that takes 2 or 3 weeks for them to turn around, and then effectively that should become legitimised proof and evidence of malpractice in child maintenance service, and we can start to take more meaningful action about it. But you can follow what I'm doing by going to the campaign website at cmssuicide.org or the Facebook page CMS Suicide, or you can follow me on Twitter, at Brian Hudson 3333, and also obviously subscribe to this channel so that whenever I put an update up, you'll get an alert. Okay, thanks for listening.